The deadliest forces in the universe don't announce themselves. They don't roar across the stars, and they don't demand surrender. They don't have to. They simply arrive, because they already know they've won. Admiral Elaine Carter stood at the heart of Titan Command, her fingers pressed against the steel console. Her face remained unreadable, but the data before her told a different story. For years, rumors had whispered of a ghost ship that wandered the dark between galaxies. A vessel beyond comprehension, beyond war, beyond anything humanity had ever seen. It was the kind of story spacers told to scare rookies. The kind of story that no one ever expected to be real. Until now. It began at 3:17 Standard Galactic Time, when the remote listening station Argus 7, positioned at the edge of known space, detected an anomaly. The station had been there for decades, monitoring the void for rogue asteroids and unidentified movement. Its crew, accustomed to years of boredom, was hardly prepared for what appeared on their sensors. Lieutenant Mara Vasquez leaned forward, staring at the screen. Her brow furrowed as she tapped the console. The object moved impossibly fast. Too fast. "Commander," she called, her voice tight with unease. "You're going to want to see this." Commander Darren Holt stepped up beside her, sipping from a lukewarm cup of coffee. "What is it, Vasquez?" She expanded the sensor readings. "Something just appeared?" Holt frowned. "Appeared?" "Yes, sir." Vasquez's fingers danced across the controls, pulling up a trajectory readout. It wasn't detected on approach. One moment it wasn't there, and then... She pointed. Holt leaned in. The readings showed no acceleration, no deceleration, no sign of propulsion. No ship moved like that. His stomach twisted. "Confirmed trajectory." Vasquez's screen updated. "Sir, it's skipping through space." Holt stiffened. "Define skipping." Vasquez tapped the screen, and the holographic projection displayed a series of blinks. Not a smooth flight path, but a sequence of instantaneous relocations. Each shift covered thousands of kilometers. No known technology could do that. Holt's voice was tight. "Run a full spectrum analysis. Heat, radiation, neutrinos, everything." Seconds passed. The readings came back. The ship had no heat signature. No emissions. It wasn't just invisible to sensors. It was practically not there. Vasquez swallowed. "Commander, what the hell are we looking at?" The station's alarms suddenly blared. New data scrolled across the screens. The object had stopped moving. And it was watching them. The report from Argus 7 reached Titan Command in under 3 minutes. By the time the Defense Council convened, Admiral Carter had already reviewed the preliminary data. "This is unprecedented," said Dr. Elias Monroe, one of Earth's leading xenotechnologists. He stood beside the central holo-display, adjusting his glasses. "Nothing in recorded history moves like this." General Hoshino, Supreme Commander of Earth's Defense Forces, leaned forward. "You're telling me this thing can teleport?" "We don't know if it's teleportation," Monroe corrected. "It could be manipulating space-time itself." Carter studied the sensor logs. The object hadn't fired a shot. It hadn't communicated. It had simply arrived. And yet, something about its behavior disturbed her. It wasn't avoiding them. It wasn't ignoring them. It was testing them. A deep silence filled the room. Then Carter exhaled. "Prepare the fleet." Several officers hesitated. "Admiral, we don't know if it's hostile," one of them said. "We don't know if it's friendly either," Carter replied, her voice cold. "And in my experience, anything that doesn't explain itself is usually a problem." Her orders were clear. The Terran fleet would track the ship, but cautiously. Within an hour, humanity's most advanced warships, the Indomitable, Solar Wrath, and Black Nova, were en route. But before they could reach the object, something changed. The ship moved again. And this time it was heading toward Earth. As the fleet closed in, a signal emerged. It was not in any known language. But it wasn't random noise either. It was deliberate. Precise. Then, suddenly, the signal changed. Words appeared on every console. Across every frequency. "Do not follow." A chill ran down Carter's spine. The voice was deep, resonant, almost too perfect, like it had been constructed rather than spoken. "Send a reply," she ordered. "Request identification." Her comms officer complied. Moments later, a response appeared. The words were English now. "You are not prepared." Then, without warning, every ship in the fleet shut down. Panic erupted across the fleet. For the first time in history, humanity's greatest warships were rendered powerless without a single shot fired. Engineers scrambled. Emergency systems flickered. But for nearly 3 hours, Every ship drifted helplessly. Then, as suddenly as it had come, the darkness lifted. Power returned. But something had changed. Outside the viewport of the Indomitable, Carter saw the alien ship. It was massive, easily the size of a dreadnought. Its surface shimmered like liquid metal, constantly shifting. And then, before their eyes, the TSS Harbinger, one of their destroyers, was engulfed in a strange field. In seconds the ship ceased to exist. It did not explode. It did not leave wreckage. It simply vanished. Carter's breath was slow and measured. "What did you do to my ship?" she demanded. The voice returned. This was a mercy. Her fists clenched. "Who are you?" For the first time there was silence. Then the voice answered. "I am the Warden." And with that the alien ship disappeared. Not into hyperspace. Not through a wormhole. It simply ceased to be there. Carter exhaled slowly, her mind racing. If this was real, if this ship could erase threats from existence itself, then humanity had just encountered something beyond war. They had encountered something that decided who was allowed to exist. And now the Warden had turned its gaze toward Earth. Humanity must now decide, do they confront the Warden? Or do they accept their place in the cosmic order? But the decision might not be theirs to make. Because the Warden has already made a choice. And this time there will be no warning. For all of human history, war had been about power, who had the biggest armies, the strongest weapons, the most advanced technology. But this was different. Because how do you fight something that doesn't obey the rules of war? Something that doesn't fear destruction, because it has never known defeat? Something that doesn't conquer, because it doesn't have to? Admiral Elaine Carter had spent her entire life preparing for war. She had seen battles where entire planets were reduced to dust. She had commanded fleets that could tear apart moons. But for the first time in her life she felt helpless. Because this war was already over. And humanity had lost before it even began. The bridge of the TSS Indomitable was silent. The crew stood frozen, staring at the empty void where the Warden's ship had once been. One moment, it had been there, an impossible force unlike anything humanity had ever encountered. The next, it had simply vanished, just like the Harbinger. Admiral Carter forced herself to breathe. She turned to her comms officer. "Status on the fleet?" The officer's voice was tight. "All ships are back online, Admiral. No further system failures." Carter's fingers clenched. The Warden hadn't disabled them permanently. It had let them go. It didn't see them as a threat. It saw them as insignificant. "Send an encrypted transmission to Titan Command," she ordered. "Full report. The Warden is real. And we are not ready for it." A deep, crushing silence hung over the fleet as the reality set in. The TSS Harbinger was gone. Not destroyed. Not crippled. Gone. There was no debris, no wreckage. No evidence it had ever existed. Carter had fought enemies that could destroy fleets. But she had never fought something that could erase them from reality itself. She took a slow breath. Set a course back to Earth. The fleet turned. For the first time in human history, the Terran Armada was retreating. The War Council chamber beneath Titan Command was carved into the very bedrock of the moon. Generals, admirals, scientists, and political leaders gathered around the central holodable. The room was heavy with unease. No one spoke. They had all seen the same transmission. The Warden was real. And it had made itself known. Carter stood at the head of the room, arms crossed. She had never seen General Hoshino, Earth's highest-ranking military officer, look uncertain before. But now his face was grim. "So," he said finally, "it's true." Dr. Elias Monroe, one of Earth's top xenotechnologists, exhaled sharply. "If this Warden can erase ships from existence, then we are facing a level of technology we cannot counter." Hoshino leaned forward. "I need options. Can we fight this thing?" Silence. Then Carter spoke. "Not with what we have." Hoshino frowned. "We have the largest fleet in the galaxy. The most advanced weapons. You're telling me none of that matters?" Carter's expression didn't waver. "I watched the Harbinger vanish without a trace. Not explode. Vanish. Our weapons are built to destroy things. But what if the Warden isn't playing by the same rules?" Hoshino's jaw tightened. "So what the hell do we do? Sit back and hope it doesn't erase Earth next?" Dr. Monroe hesitated. "There may be another way." All eyes turned to him. "There are records," Monroe continued, "of civilizations that encountered the Warden before. None of them survived, but—" Hoshino narrowed his eyes. "But—" Monroe exhaled. "One of them left a warning behind." He activated the holodable. A fragmented, ancient transmission played. The voice was barely understandable, distorted by time. The Warden is not invincible. It has limits. But to challenge it, you must understand what it protects. The transmission cut out. Hoshino frowned. What does it protect? Monroe's face was grim. We don't know. But whatever it is, it was worth erasing entire civilizations for. Carter's mind raced. The Warden hadn't attacked them. It had warned them. Do not follow. You are not prepared. That meant it wasn't just erasing threats. It was guarding something. And humanity had gotten too close. The debate raged for hours. Some argued for war. Others pushed for diplomacy. A few even suggested doing nothing, hoping the Warden would leave them alone. Carter stood. Waiting is not an option. The Warden let us live because it doesn't see us as a problem, yet. But that could change. Hoshino nodded. Agreed. So what's our move? Carter's gaze hardened. We find out what it's guarding? Gasps filled the room. You want to provoke it further? One politician demanded. We're already on its radar, Carter said. If we don't understand what's at stake, we'll never know how to deal with it. Hoshino exhaled. Then he turned to Monroe. How do we find out what it's guarding? Monroe hesitated. There's a system, an uncharted one. It appears in the myths of several extinct civilizations. They all called it the Black Veil. Carter's instincts flared. And what's in the Black Veil? Monroe met her gaze. No one knows. Because every species that tried to enter, vanished. Silence. Then Carter smirked. Well, guess it's time to pay a visit? Preparations were swift. The TSS Titan-born, humanity's most advanced warship, was launched ahead of schedule. Its mission? Find out what the Warden was guarding. Carter took command personally. The crew was handpicked, scientists, soldiers, and the best minds humanity had to offer. As the Titan-born left Earth's orbit, an uneasy tension filled the ship. They were not just going into uncharted space. They were going into a graveyard. It took days to reach the edge of the system known as the Black Veil. The moment they arrived, sensors began malfunctioning. Readings fluctuated wildly. Time distortions flickered across the ship's systems. And then, the Warden's ship appeared. Right in front of them. No warning. No distortion. It was simply there. The voice returned. I warned you. Carter stood, heart pounding. We need to know the truth. Silence. Then for the first time, the Warden's ship opened. A rift appeared, a doorway into something far beyond human comprehension. And the Warden spoke once more. Then come and see. The Titan-born moved forward, entering the unknown. And what they found inside changed everything. Because the Warden wasn't protecting a weapon. It was guarding a secret. A secret that could unmake the universe itself. Inside the heart of the Black Veil, Carter and her crew will discover a truth older than time itself. A truth that might explain why civilizations vanish. And why the Warden exists at all. But the deeper they go, the more they realize. Some things were never meant to be found. Some truths are hidden for a reason. Some secrets are buried because they should never be known. And some doors, once opened, can never be closed again. Admiral Elaine Carter had spent her life chasing the unknown. She had faced wars, alien threats, and impossible odds. But as she stood at the precipice of the Warden's secret, staring into the abyss of the Black Veil, she felt something she had never felt before. Not fear. Not awe. But a deep, primal certainty that whatever lay beyond this doorway, humanity was never meant to see it. And yet it was too late to turn back now. Because the door had already been opened. The TSS Titan-born hovered at the threshold of the rift, its hull bathed in the strange, shifting light emanating from the Warden's ship. Inside the bridge, Carter's crew waited in tense silence. I warned you, the Warden's voice echoed through their comms. Carter exhaled. And yet here we are. The Warden did not respond. Because there was nothing left to say. The rift yawned open before them, a swirling void of incomprehensible darkness, speckled with flashes of light that seemed to bend and twist in ways that defied physics. Carter turned to her crew. Status report. Her chief engineer, Lieutenant Hiro Tanaka, scanned the readings. The rift, it's not just a spatial distortion. It's something else. Dr. Elias Monroe, the mission's lead xenotechnologist, was pale. We're not detecting a traditional wormhole. The energy signature, it's fluctuating in ways we don't understand. Carter narrowed her eyes. Can we enter safely? Monroe hesitated. Define safely. Carter smirked. Not getting torn apart at the atomic level. Tanaka sighed. No guarantees, Admiral. Carter exhaled. Then she turned back to the viewport. She could feel it. The same pull she had felt ever since the Warden's first warning. The truth was in there. Waiting. She nodded. Take us in. The Titanborn advanced. And the moment they crossed the threshold, reality shattered. The ship lurched. The stars outside disappeared, replaced by an endless expanse of shifting darkness. Time itself fractured, the ship's clocks flickering wildly, displaying years that had not yet passed. Carter's vision blurred. She clenched her fists against the console, steadying herself. Status, she barked. Tanaka's voice was tight. We're here. But I don't know where here is. Monroe stared at the external monitors. My God. Carter followed his gaze. Beyond the viewport, space itself breathed. The darkness pulsed with shifting, living energy. Shadows moved where there was no light. And in the distance, floating like forgotten relics, were ruins. Monroe swallowed. Those are ships. Carter frowned. Abandoned? Monroe's voice was hollow. No. They're preserved. Carter narrowed her eyes. Explain? Monroe hesitated. It's as if time here doesn't move the way we understand it. These ships, they look old. Thousands of years old. Tanaka's voice came through shaky. Admiral, we just got an identification ping from one of those vessels. Carter's stomach twisted. What? Tanaka took a breath. It's a human ship. Silence. Monroe's voice was barely a whisper. That's impossible. Carter's heart pounded. Send me visuals. The screen flickered. The image appeared. And her breath caught. It was a Terran warship, one that had disappeared over 100 years ago, floating in perfect condition, as if it had been waiting. Carter's mind raced. This wasn't just a graveyard. It was a prison. Get me a full scan of that ship, she ordered. The readings came back almost instantly. It's intact, Tanaka confirmed. No signs of decay, no damage. Monroe's voice was urgent. If that ship has been here for over a century, then that means time in this place doesn't work the way it should. Carter exhaled. Can we dock? Tanaka hesitated. Technically? Yes. But should we? Carter didn't hesitate. Prepare the boarding team. Minutes later, a team of 6, including Carter herself, stepped into the Titanborn's docking bay, suited up and armed. The airlock hissed. The boarding tube extended. The moment Carter stepped inside the derelict ship, her helmet comm crackled with static. Then a voice whispered. You shouldn't be here. Carter's blood ran cold. The ship was silent, no power, no crew. But the whisper had been real. Monroe's voice came through her helmet. Admiral, are you hearing that? She nodded, gripping her weapon tighter. Yeah. Stay close. They moved deeper into the corridors. The ship was in perfect condition. Not a single sign of damage or decay. But it felt wrong. Like it was trapped in time. Then, another whisper. They don't belong here. Tanaka cursed. What the hell was that? Carter turned a corner, and froze. A body floated in the corridor. Perfectly preserved. Its eyes were open, as if it had died mid-scream. Monroe scanned it. His voice was shaking. This crewman, his uniform, it's from 100 years ago. But his body? He looks like he just died, Carter finished. Silence. Then the ship lurched. The whispering grew louder. And then, the lights flickered on. Carter grabbed her comm Titanborn. We have a situation. A new voice interrupted her. Not the whispers. Something else. Something ancient. You were warned. Carter's blood turned to ice. Warden? The ship shook. The shadows around them moved. And then, a doorway appeared at the end of the hall. A doorway that had not been there before. Carter stared. What the hell? The warden's voice returned. You wanted the truth. Step inside. Monroe hesitated. This feels like a trap. Carter exhaled. It probably is. She took a step forward. And then, with a deep breath, she walked through the doorway. Light engulfed her. For a brief moment she felt herself falling, not through space but through something else. And then she saw it. The truth. The reason the Warden existed. The reason civilizations had been erased. The reason the universe was not what humanity thought it was. Carter's breath hitched. Because she finally understood. And the truth was worse than she had ever imagined. Carter and her team have seen the truth. But knowing is not enough. Because now the Warden will decide. Can humanity be trusted with what they have learned? Or must they be erased like so many before them? And this time, there will be no mercy. The dead civilizations never spoke of what they found. Not because they had no chance to warn others. But because someone, decided that they would never speak again. Admiral Elaine Carter had seen countless battles, faced impossible odds, and led humanity's greatest fleets to victory. But what lay before her now wasn't a battle. It wasn't an enemy she could fight. It was a judgment. And the Warden was the executioner. Carter stood frozen in a vast, impossible chamber. Her breath came in shallow gasps, her body numb. The moment she had stepped through the doorway inside the derelict ship, everything changed. The world she had known fractured. Reality itself had peeled away, revealing something far older, far greater than anything she had ever imagined. The chamber around her wasn't a place. It wasn't even space as she understood it. It was outside of time. A cosmic void filled with shifting structures, neither solid nor ethereal, like frozen moments of existence caught mid-collapse. At the center of it all stood the Warden. Not as a ship, not as a voice, but as something else. Something that had no form, because it had never needed one. Carter's earpiece crackled. "Admiral? Are you receiving? This is Monroe. Where are you?" She swallowed. Her voice was tight. "I don't know." She turned, scanning the infinite horizon. Her team was gone. The Titan-born was gone. She was alone. Then, the Warden's voice rumbled through her very bones. "You sought the truth. Now you must answer for it." Carter's fingers clenched into fists. "I don't answer to you." The Warden's presence shifted, not in movement but in understanding. "All who come here answer. That is why none return." Carter's breath hitched. None return. The civilizations before them, the ones who had tried to uncover the Warden's secret. They weren't simply destroyed. They had been removed. Carter steadied herself. "You called this a warning before. Now it's a trial." "Why?" The Warden's voice did not waver. "Because your kind does not turn back. You only move forward. Even when you should not." Carter's jaw tightened. "That's called progress." The Warden's presence darkened. "You call it progress. We call it a pattern." The shifting structures around them began to pulse. Images flickered in the void, scenes from civilizations long erased. A war-torn planet, its surface burning. A fleet shattered, its wreckage drifting forever in silence. A great city frozen in time, its people unaware that they had already ceased to exist. Carter exhaled sharply. "These are the ones you erased. The ones who would have become what must never be." A cold realization settled over her. You don't erase civilizations for what they've done. You erase them for what they might do. The Warden's silence was its answer. Carter's mind raced. If this thing judged entire species based on their potential future, then humanity was already in danger. She took a slow breath. "And what about us?" The Warden spoke. "You will be judged." And the trial began. 3 glowing symbols materialized before her, shifting, ancient, incomprehensible. The Warden's voice resonated through the void. The trial of knowledge. The trial of strength. The trial of purpose. Carter's eyes narrowed. "And if I fail?" The Warden's response was absolute. "Then your species will be erased." She clenched her fists. "Then I guess I'd better pass." The first symbol flared to life. And the trial of knowledge began. The void around her shifted. Suddenly, Carter was no longer in the cosmic chamber. She stood in Titan command. But something was wrong. The officers moved in slow, distorted patterns, their words echoing strangely. The walls blurred and shifted, like the station was being rewritten moment by moment. She turned. A console glowed in front of her, displaying a countdown. 60 seconds. A question appeared on the screen. "What is the future of your species?" Her heart pounded. What kind of question was that? The options blinked into existence. War. B. Dominion. C. Peace. D. Extinction. Carter scowled. What kind of rigged test is this? The timer ticked down. 45 seconds. She took a breath. The Warden wasn't looking for blind optimism. It was looking for truth. Carter pressed C. Peace. The room shuddered. The screen flickered. The words changed. Incorrect. Carter's stomach tightened. What? The countdown reached 0. And Titan Command dissolved into darkness. Carter landed hard, not in Titan Command but on the bridge of the Titan-born. The ship was under attack. Warning sirens blared. Crew members shouted. Outside the viewport, an impossible enemy fleet swarmed toward them. Carter's instincts kicked in. "Give me weapons control." Tanaka's voice crackled. "Admiral, those ships aren't real. None of this is real." She ignored him. "Fire on my mark." The Titan-born's weapons lit up, unleashing a barrage against the incoming ships. The fleet faltered, then vanished. And the moment they disappeared, so did the Titanborn. Carter fell again. And the final trial began. She landed on Earth. But not her Earth. The sky was dark. The cities lay in ruins. And at the center of it all stood a monument to humanity's failure. A towering alien obelisk, marked with the Warden's sigil. The symbol of a civilization erased. Carter exhaled. You think this is where we're headed? The Warden's voice surrounded her. It is where all have gone before. She turned, staring at the silent ruins. The dust of a species that never saw the end coming. Carter clenched her fists. You're wrong. The Warden did not speak. Carter's voice was steel. Humanity isn't like the others. We don't just destroy. We create. We build. We adapt. The obelisk shattered. And then, Carter was back. Standing in the cosmic void, facing the Warden once more. The trials were over. And the verdict was about to be delivered. Silence. The Warden's presence shifted. Then, for the first time, it spoke without its usual finality. Perhaps. Carter's breath caught. Not absolute judgment. Not erasure. But possibility. The Warden's voice rumbled. You are not ready. But you are different. The chamber collapsed. And Carter was back aboard the Titanborn. Monroe grabbed her. Admiral. Are you okay? She exhaled. Yeah. Then slowly she turned toward the viewport. The Warden's ship was gone. But its message remained. Humanity had been spared. For now. Carter and her crew survived the trial. But the Warden's judgment still lingers. Because now humanity must answer a far more dangerous question. What if the Warden was right? Survival is not victory. A second chance is not a blessing. It is a test. And sometimes, living with the knowledge of what could have been, is worse than destruction itself. Admiral Elaine Carter had stood before the Warden, faced its impossible judgment, and lived. Humanity had not been erased. But it had not been forgiven either. Because now they had seen the truth. And the truth had seen them. The TSS Titanborn floated in the void beyond the black veil, silent and still. For the first time in hours, or perhaps days, Admiral Carter sat motionless in her command chair. Her mind was still reeling from the trial. She had stood before something older than time, something that decided the fate of civilizations. And she had survived. The Warden had spared humanity, but not out of mercy. Out of curiosity. A chance. A warning. The weight of that knowledge settled over her like a heavy stone. Her comms officer's voice cut through the silence. Admiral. Earth Command is requesting an immediate report. Carter exhaled slowly. Open a channel. A moment later, General Hoshino's face appeared on the main screen. His expression was unreadable. Admiral Carter. Carter met his gaze. General. Hoshino's voice was carefully controlled. I assume your mission was eventful. Carter leaned forward. Sir, we have a problem. Silence. Then Hoshino nodded. I gathered as much. Permission to dock at Titan Command, Carter said. This isn't a debrief we can have over comms. Hoshino's expression hardened. Agreed. The transmission cut. Carter turned to her crew. Helm, set course for Titan Command. The Titanborn turned away from the black veil. But Carter knew they had not left it behind. Because some things don't stay in the past. Some things follow you home. When the Titanborn arrived at Titan Command, Carter was immediately summoned to the High Security Council chamber. The room was small, barely large enough to hold the 5 most powerful figures in Earth's military and scientific community. At the center of the room, a holographic projection displayed the Warden's final words. You are not ready. But you are different. The words hung over them like a shadow. General Hoshino broke the silence. Tell me everything. Carter took a deep breath. And then she told them. Everything. The trial. The other civilizations that had been erased. The truth about the Warden's purpose. The knowledge that humanity had barely passed the test, and that the Warden was still watching them. When she finished, the room was silent. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Dr. Monroe, head of Earth's Xenotechnological Institute, ran a hand through his hair. This is, he exhaled. This is worse than I expected. Hoshino frowned. How so? Monroe turned toward the group. The Warden's trial wasn't just a test. He pointed at the recording. It was a measurement. It wanted to know how close we are to being a problem. Carter's stomach twisted. Hoshino's expression darkened. And? Monroe exhaled. We're closer than we think. For the next several hours, the council argued. Some believed they should do nothing. Avoid any actions that might provoke the Warden further. Others, like Hoshino, wanted to prepare for war. To find a way to fight, just in case. Carter listened. But deep down she already knew the answer. Because the Warden had said it itself. You are not ready. That wasn't a warning. It was an invitation. The Warden didn't just erase civilizations. It monitored them. Measured them. And when the time was right, it decided if they deserved to exist. If humanity wasn't ready now, then one day, it would be. The only question was, would they be ready in time? 3 days after the Titanborn's return, Earth's deep space observation posts began detecting anomalies. Strange sensor distortions. Unusual spatial fluctuations. At first, scientists dismissed them as cosmic interference. But then, one of the anomalies moved. Not in a natural drift. Not like an asteroid. But deliberately. Carter was on the Titanborn's bridge when the report came in. Tanaka, her chief engineer, turned toward her. His face was pale. Admiral, he said. It's them? Carter's breath caught. The Warden? Tanaka swallowed. No. He tapped the controls. A holographic projection flickered into view. It was a fleet. Not human. Not Warden. Something else. Something new. Monroe's voice was barely a whisper. My God. Carter narrowed her eyes. Who the hell are they? No one had an answer. Because no one had seen ships like these before. And yet, as Carter stared at the strange, impossibly advanced fleet, a cold realization settled over her. They weren't here by accident. They had been waiting. Waiting for someone to pass the Warden's test. And now, they had arrived. The unknown fleet remained on the edge of human space, unmoving. Not responding to hails. Not broadcasting signals. Just watching. The tension across Earth's military command reached a breaking point. If these ships were here for war, then humanity had to strike first. But Carter hesitated. She had seen what happened to civilizations that acted too quickly. That assumed they understood what they did not. Instead, she made a decision. A risky one. One that might get her killed. But one that had to be made. She would go alone. 6. The meeting. The Titanborn advanced slowly, moving toward the center of the unknown fleet. Carter stood on the bridge, arms folded. Open a transmission. Her comms officer hesitated. They haven't responded to any? I know, Carter said. Open it anyway. A second later, the channel opened. Carter exhaled. My name is Admiral Elaine Carter of the Terran Fleet. She paused. I know you've been watching us. I know you've been waiting. She leaned forward. So why don't you tell me who you are? For a long moment, nothing. Then, a voice came through the speakers. Resonant. And familiar. We are what comes after. Carter's heart pounded. After what? The voice answered. After the Warden. Silence. Then the transmission cut. Carter exhaled sharply. Because she finally understood. The Warden had been testing humanity. But these newcomers? They were here for something else. They were here for the real game. The game that started after you survived. Carter turned to her crew. Her voice was steady. Prepare for first contact. Because the trial was over. And the war of the survivors was about to begin. The Warden tested civilizations. But those who passed were not free. They were drafted into something far worse. Because in the depths of the universe, only the strongest survive. The Warden did not test us for survival. It tested us for something worse. It tested us to see if we were worthy of playing the real game. Admiral Elaine Carter had faced the impossible. She had stood before the Warden, been judged, and lived. But the true consequences of that survival had just arrived. A new fleet had entered human space. They did not belong to the Warden. They belonged to something far older. Something that had been waiting. And now the time had come. The TSS Titanborn floated in the cold abyss, surrounded by an armada of ships that should not exist. The unknown fleet remained motionless. No signals. No transmissions. No attacks. Just watching. Carter stood on the bridge, staring at the ominous vessels. Their design was unlike anything she had ever seen. Smooth, almost organic. Their hulls shifted as if adapting to the very laws of reality around them. And yet they did not move. They were waiting. Carter clenched her jaw. Are they scanning us? Lieutenant Hiro Tanaka, her chief engineer, ran a diagnostic. No, actually it's the opposite. They're letting us scan them. Carter's stomach tightened. That's not a mistake. Monroe, their xenotechnologist, exhaled sharply. They want us to know exactly how outmatched we are. Carter turned to her comms officer. Open a channel. A second later, the transmission was sent. This is Admiral Elaine Carter of the Terran Fleet. You've been watching us. Now it's time to talk. Silence. Then, a voice came through. It, resonant, and old. You have been chosen. The bridge went silent. Carter narrowed her eyes. Chosen for what? The voice answered. For the War of the Survivors. The War of the Survivors. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Carter's voice was steady. Explain? The transmission continued. The Warden was never your enemy. It was your gateway. Carter's breath caught. You mean, it wasn't testing us for destruction? No. The voice deepened. It was testing you for us. The pieces snapped together in Carter's mind. The Warden's trial. The civilizations that had disappeared. The ones that had passed the test. They hadn't been spared. They had been drafted. Monroe paled. My God. This isn't about wiping out threats. It's about selecting players. The voice continued. Those who fail are removed. Those who pass are brought into the game. Carter clenched her fists. And what game is that? For the first time there was a pause. Then the voice responded. The oldest game in the universe. The main screen flickered. And suddenly, the void was gone. In its place, a new image appeared. A battlefield. A war-torn sector of space filled with burning planets and shattered fleets. And at the center, something huge. Something alive. Something waiting. Monroe exhaled sharply. What are we looking at? The voice returned. The prize? Carter narrowed her eyes. A battlefield? Not just a battlefield. The heart of the oldest war in existence. Carter's breath caught. Are you telling me civilizations have been fighting over this place for eons? The voice was calm. Yes. Tanaka spoke up. But why? What's so important about it? The answer came without hesitation. Because whoever wins controls what comes next. Carter frowned. What do you mean? The image zoomed in, focusing on the massive, slumbering entity at the heart of the battlefield. Monroe whispered. That's a construct. The voice corrected him. No. That is the architect. Carter's pulse quickened. What is it? The voice responded. The last remnant of the ones who came before. The only force in the universe capable of reshaping reality itself. Silence. Then Monroe staggered back. My God. He turned toward Carter. They're fighting for control of the architect's power. Carter exhaled. Whoever wins, gets to rewrite the universe? The voice confirmed. Correct. Carter's mind raced. An ancient war. A battlefield beyond imagination. A slumbering god machine that could reshape existence itself. And now, humanity was part of it. Her fists clenched. And if we refuse? The voice remained steady. Then you will be erased. Like all who came before. Her stomach twisted. Monroe whispered. We don't have a choice. Carter exhaled. We never did. She turned toward the screen. Who are you? The voice responded. We are the chosen. The ones who passed the trials before you. Carter's breath hitched. And how many of you have survived? Pause. Then the voice answered. None. The fleet vanished, not through hyperspace but in a way Carter could barely comprehend. And suddenly, the Titan-born was somewhere else. They were no longer in human space. They were on the battlefield. Alarms blared. Admiral? Tanaka shouted. We've been moved, our entire fleet is gone. Carter's heart pounded. Status report. The bridge officers scrambled. Then Monroe spoke. Admiral, we have company. Carter turned. And saw them. A new fleet. Not the chosen. Not the Warden. Something else. Something hungry. The comms crackled. A new voice came through. Cold. Amused. New blood. Carter's spine went rigid. The voice chuckled. Let's see if you're worth killing. And the enemy opened fire. Explosions erupted around them. Carter barked orders. Evasive maneuvers. Return fire. The Titan-born's weapons flared, striking back at the enemy ships. But these weren't normal ships. They moved like shadows. Shifting through space in ways that shouldn't be possible. Tanaka's voice was panicked. Our weapons aren't hitting them. Monroe's hands flew over his controls. They're bending space-time around themselves. Carter's jaw tightened. Then we need to outthink them. Her mind raced. This wasn't a battle for dominance. This was a test. The first move in a longer war. She inhaled sharply. And then she gave the order that changed everything. Target the space between them. The weapons fired. And the enemy flinched. For the first time they hesitated. Because they hadn't expected humanity to learn this fast. Carter smirked. Yeah. were quick learners, and the real war began. The battle raged. But Carter wasn't just thinking about this fight. She was thinking about the architect, and the question that haunted her. If the Warden had been selecting players for this war, who had created the game in the first place? And worse, what happened when someone finally won? Next chapter, the masters of the game. The war of the survivors has begun. But Carter knows there's something deeper at play, something behind even the chosen. Because in a war where the prize is the power to rewrite reality itself, who are the ones really pulling the strings? And what happens when they finally step into the light?